Hi, everyone. Welcome to anyone watching live, as well as anyone who watches this later. I am Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I am on today with Jessica Barba Brown, who is a senior advisor with We Can Vote. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, Kelly, how's it going?
Great. So I am excited to talk to you. This live stream thing is still new for us, but it's super fun to get right out to the viewers. So let's start with just a little bit about what We Can Vote is.
Sure. We Can Vote is a nonpartisan coalition that has come together around the sole goal of keeping the 2020 election safe, secure, and successful. We started in March, just as the pandemic was unfolding, and understanding that we had to really think differently about how our elections were going to happen this year. So we recruited civic engagement organizations, corporations, bipartisan elected officials, and public health organizations to come around this goal of how can we make sure that people can vote in a safe and healthy way this year and have a safe and successful election, as we have in many points through America's history, through world wars, through the 1918 pandemic. So we know it's possible, but we knew it would be a challenge. And so that's what the coalition has been working on all year since March.
And what's your background? How did you get into this kind of work?
Yeah, interestingly, I have worked on a number of different issues throughout my career, various political issues and campaigns. In terms of healthcare work, I worked for Enroll America when the Affordable Care Act marketplaces were launching. And I also worked for Planned Parenthood during the first couple of years of the Trump administration. And so I had this kind of healthcare background. And then I also, just this past year, decided to focus more on election-related work and worked on voter registration. And, never did I think that my healthcare background and the civic engagement work would sort of collide in this very odd way. But here we are. And so it's actually been really cool to draw on both of those parts of my background and, just feeling like this is a really important thing to do this year.
So what are some of this is probably self-explanatory, but some of the biggest issues in making sure that we are healthy while voting?
Absolutely. I mean, the first issue that we worked on when we were back in March and just knowing that this was coming was how do we prepare our election administrators and sort of help them to conduct safe elections? Most changes to election administration roll out over many months and many election cycles, not just like, you flip a switch and all of a sudden you can go to all mail voting or you can go to all, early voting. And so it's really been amazing to see how election administrators have really stepped up this year and, really expanded the ways that people can vote in a safe and healthy way. So, in the early stages of this, we were very focused on advocacy and getting people involved because we knew that we had to expand some of those options for people like mail voting. And you saw a lot of states make moves to make mail voting more accessible for folks. Do things like do online voter registration, online mail ballot requests. These are things that didn't exist in a lot of states prior to this pandemic. And so in a way, it's accelerated some of those moves, which is, really great. But even with, really robust mail voting, we knew we always needed to protect in-person options. In-person voting is incredibly important for people with disabilities, for people who need language assistance, for people who they just feel more comfortable voting that way. They have for their whole lives. And so we knew that we had to make in-person voting also really safe. And so we had to focus on recruiting poll workers, on ensuring that public health officials and state election officials are working really closely together so that they can help advise about what kinds of polling locations are most safe. How do you set up the line so that people are standing 6 feet apart? What sort of guidance do we need to give to voters in terms of bringing their own pen or, don't wipe down the machines with your own sanitizing wipe because that's actually really expensive equipment, things like that. So through all of those things, we've been able to work together with this coalition to and just really thrilled that there are safe and healthy options for people to vote this year. And it's pretty astounding that 59 million Americans have already cast their ballot, and we still have 9 days left to go.
Yeah, I think these numbers are going to be really, really exciting this year. So you have worked as a poll worker this year. What are the things you saw that you think are good, that were working well, and what are the things that are still worrying you?
I have to say, I feel a lot better about the November election that I did when it was back in June, and I served as a poll worker where I live in DC, and I do think that they did a very good job, I would say, in terms of really making sure the polling site was safe. So we had very long lines out the door. But the reason for that is that they only allowed, 10 people or 12 people into this big gym at one time. So once you got inside, it felt very safe. Everything was spaced apart. Signage, hand sanitizer, all the things that you want to see to make sure that the experience is safe. I do think that they learned that because the lines were so long, people were, waiting until midnight to vote in DC, that really then they did a move to expand mail voting for the November election, and every registered voter in DC was mailed their ballot. So, we've seen now more of that that experience from the primaries have really carried into November. And so I'm very heartened, and seeing places like Texas, which are having really great early in-person voting experiences, Wisconsin, places like that did not have the best experience in the primary. So I think that was a trial run, and it gave election administrators a lot to work with and go on in terms of how can we make this even better for November. So I'm feeling actually really good about the way things are now, and seeing this incredible turnout so far. And we know that there's millions more people to come, and people can be assured that there are going to be safety measures in place.
So voting laws and procedures are, of course, different from state to state, and even within states, county to county, whoever is running the local elections. How can people find out what options they have available in their own locale?
Sure. Well, we created a website called healthyvoting.org. And we did this in collaboration with election administration experts and with public health experts. This is actually the first time that public health groups have issued voter guidelines. So the American Public Health Association helped us create this, the National Association of City and County Health Officials, and we're working with the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials. So at healthyvoting.org, you can check out the different options for your state. We have every state, every voting jurisdiction, and it takes you through not only what are the laws in your state, which you can find that in a lot of places, but we're also giving that public health advice as well. So even when you go to, put your ballot in the mail, if you're voting by mail, you have to remember when you come home, wash your hands. What are some tips from a public health perspective of how to maintain safety when you go out to vote at the polls? For things like if you are sick or if you are concerned that you might have been exposed, like what are your options? So those are the kinds of tips that we're giving on healthyvoting.org. It's available in English and Spanish. It's real user friendly. So definitely go check it out if you haven't made your plan yet.
And even I saw it has a PDF you can download for a pocket guide that you can bring with you.
Yes, you can. And we've actually shipped about 150,000 of those pocket guides out across the country. They're being distributed by local departments of health, by community health workers, at food banks. And it's a great little guide that, feel free to run some off on your printer, take them out to in your community if you want to help spread the word. And I really think it's about assuring people that they can do this, that there are options. And also that it's like this year has been so difficult on so many levels. But this is like one thing that you can do that really makes you feel good. It's within your control. You do have options. And we just really want people to not be scared of the process. It's safe, it's secure, and they can do it.
So, one thing that I don't know how many places have this, if this is everywhere, but I just recently discovered curbside voting.
Mhm.
Is that a common thing? Do a lot of places have that? I'm thinking particularly of people who maybe have mobility problems, who can't wait in these very long lines, if that might be an option for them.
Exactly. Yes. Curbside voting, this is one of those things that it has been around for many, many years in most places, but maybe you didn't hear about it as much
Mhm.
now, than this year, because it has, in many places, they're expanding curbside options. So you're exactly right. Curbside voting has been an option, for many years in places, and usually for folks with disabilities, who prefer to just, who can't stand in line, who want to stay in their car as they vote. And this year we've seen it being expanded for people, for example, if you are sick or may have been exposed. There are some jurisdictions that are allowing people to vote curbside. There are some places where, if you've got a big parking lot, sometimes that might be actually safer than trying to get all those people into a traditional polling location. So it's one of those things that, again, it's another option of many that people have to cast their ballot this year. And so definitely, if that's something that you qualify for in your state, it's a great thing to explore.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make sure that that everyone spreads the word that that exists. I recently had a coworker who said, "My mom can't stand in these lines. What am I going to do with her?" And I said, "I think this curbside thing is a could be an option. You should look into it." And it turns out, at least in Illinois, it should be available at every polling location, but you may have to request in advance, and so it's something that you have to think about ahead of time.
Yes, and that is the story with voting this year in general, is that
Mhm.
think about it ahead of time. And I think most Americans are doing that, which is awesome. Because I think for people who didn't tune in into the election until like the day before, they might have not had as many options. But now I think people have been really tuned in. They have been tracking, okay, coronavirus has affected our lives in so many ways. So this is one example of something where we need to say, okay, I can't just, go do it the way I used to. It's like, I need to really think and plan ahead. And because we have so many more Americans voting early now, that's really going to help election officials on election day. There are going to be people who vote on election day, and that's great, and they should, and there will be safety measures in place. But because we've had so many more millions of Americans voting early, it's really helped kind of decompress that day and reduce lines, reduce crowding, and keep our communities safe, which is what we're all here to do.
So you mentioned these pocket guides that you had sent out around the country. What are some other ways that we can vote? Is trying to get the word out about the different options that people have?
Sure. Well, we're running digital ads, and they've been seen already by 3.5 million people, which is exciting. And we're focusing on reaching infrequent voters, people of color, people who are who might need that kind of extra assurance of again, you can do this. And especially if you're voting by mail for the first time, or voting early for the first time, you do need to, again, take a couple of extra steps just to check out, okay, what, am I eligible? How do I get my ballot? Where do I return my ballot? But again, we're really seeing that people are tuning in and interested in their options. And so we're helping them navigate that. So we are working, we're reaching people directly through these digital ads. And we also have this fantastic coalition of over 55 organizations that we're working with to help spread the word. And these are groups that are both doing on the ground organizing, they're doing digital organizing, the public health associations that we're working closely with have been fantastic. And, it's amazing to think that these public health officials, they have been, I can't imagine what it must be like to be, a public health official this year when you've been dealing with, contact tracing and school reopenings, but they have been just incredible partners in helping to make sure that the election still goes on safely. And it's incredible. So like this, actually today, the American Public Health Association virtual conference is kicking off, and we'll be there talking with more public health folks about how they can use their voices to help their communities vote.
Excellent. Yeah. So I've been voting since, I'm telling my age here, I've been voting since 1996, so a pretty long time. But this was the first year that I voted by mail. And yeah, it was this whole new set of things to learn. I was like, okay, how do I request it? I'm going to sign this thing here. And, they make it pretty easy in Illinois, but still, it was a whole set of things to learn. I, for one, hope that these drop boxes remain a thing. I really liked voting by mail, but having the security of dropping it off in a drop box.
Yes. I think the drop boxes, I do think they'll make a reappearance. That's my prediction for 2022 and 2024, because I do think people, it kind of has the best of both worlds, where you get to minimize your risk in terms of you don't have to go to a polling location with a bunch of other people. But yeah, that feeling of I'm going to return this directly to the source rather than have something potentially go wrong in the mail. Although I think the mail delivery has also been fine, and it's going well, and ballots are being delivered. But yes, I do think that people have been tuning into that as a new thing, and I do predict that it will stay around for future cycles.
It also felt like the best of all worlds, voting with kids. So I was able to vote at home, talk through the ballot with them, show them what I was voting for. And then, I had always loved taking the kids to the polling place with us. And this year we could take them to the drop box and say, yay, we voted. So it seemed good in that way too.
Yes. Well, I relate. I did the same thing with my kids yesterday. We filled it at the kitchen table. We walked to the drop box. And I mean, what was great with doing it with kids is that, we just walked into the drop box, put it in, we cheered, and then we left. Whereas, standing in line at the polling place, I would have been like hearing the complaints and like, where's my snack? And, all these other things. So, it was great.
Yeah. So what sorts of, it seems like early voting has been going relatively well. There have been long lines throughout the country, but it's been going relatively well. But as many people as are voting by mail and voting early, I still anticipate huge, huge numbers on Election Day. Are there particular things that you're concerned with on Election Day that people should be thinking about?
The most important thing for people who are going to be voting on Election Day is just to remember these same common sense safety precautions that we have now been practicing for 7 months, because we have to do it every time we go out, which is, maintain physical distance, wear a mask, and wash your hands. Those are the most important things we can do to protect ourselves, protect our community. And, we have seen people doing it in early voting as well. And so, I'm really hopeful that Election Day will also be a smooth experience for that reason. One of the other kind of innovations of this year that hasn't existed before is different kinds of polling locations. You've seen some of these super centers, people opening up the big basketball stadium. And, that's really great because it allows a lot more physical distance, and you can have, more people voting in a single location, but more spread out. That obviously is not going to be possible in your typical, school cafeteria and things like that. So I do think that, the most important thing people can do is remember that they have the tools and the knowledge that they need to stay safe while they vote, and to, go early as possible. Again, that's the theme of this election, is everything earlier than you think you need to. And we still have many more days of early voting. So, for people who maybe they haven't done the mail ballot thing and they do want to vote in person, pretty much every state around the country at this point has early voting up and going. And so definitely check out the options in your state.
And it hadn't occurred to me ahead of time. I luckily thought of it before we went to drop off our ballots. But, I've always known you shouldn't wear political clothing when you go vote. You shouldn't wear like the name of a candidate. And it just didn't even occur to me that the mask may also be something you're wearing that has your preferred candidate's name on it, and you shouldn't do.
Yes. So don't wear the political mask when you go to vote. But if that's all you have, they will have PPE at the polling place for you. So there are disposable masks and things like that available at polling locations. And again, these should not be barriers for people to go vote. So they can feel assured that even if that's the only mask you have, just still go and do it.
Do you have tips for people who are working as poll workers who need to be there for a little bit longer and the types of precautions that they should be taking?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the precautions are similar to voters, obviously maintaining physical distance, wearing a mask, washing your hands. The other thing that's a consideration for poll workers, for example, if you're there the whole day, you're going to have to stop and take a break to eat and to drink water. That is, something you're going to have to do. So, make sure where is a good place you can do that, where you can be, isolated from other folks. If there is an outdoor option, where you are, obviously being in that, better ventilated outdoor spaces are great. And again, every election jurisdiction across the country has been working really hard to secure PPE for poll workers, to give them proper training, to know, again, what's the flow of people throughout a polling location. So, we're going to send people in this way. They're going to go out another exit. We're going to not sort of circulate people around in the same room. This is happening, in every election jurisdiction. And so really following the guidance of your local election official and making sure that you are listening and following the instructions from the local election official is important for both voters and for poll workers.
So what would you like people to be doing in these final 9 days? I can't believe it's just 9 days before the election to help spread the word about ways to vote in a healthy manner. What can they be doing to help your organization?
Sure. Well, first of all, definitely go vote yourselves. So if you haven't done that yet, that's the number one thing. Check out healthyvoting.org. And we also have a make a plan tool on there. So you can go make your voting plan, share it to social media. Here's how I'm voting, and really check in with those friends and family and make sure that they have their plan to vote. At this point of the election cycle, everybody's, heard so many ads, read so many news stories. It's really the one-on-one conversations that are going to make the difference in helping people cast their ballot. And if people have any, questions or concerns, they're really all addressed on healthyvoting.org. So definitely encourage you to check that out. And again, really listen to those local trusted messengers like your election officials, like your public health officials, and not get too, drowned into the noise of the outside. But it's really those one-on-one conversations. So please do check out healthyvoting.org and make your plan, and then make sure everybody has one too.
And how do we make sure, hopefully COVID won't continue to be a thing 2 years, 4 years from now with future elections. But this is always going to be the start of flu season in November when we're voting. How do we make sure that we continue some of these healthy habits moving forward after this election cycle is over?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been really cool actually to see the public health associations who they've been focused on voting as a social determinant of health. For people who have higher voting rates, they tend to have better health outcomes actually. And so, for public health associations who have been really focused on getting people to vote. This year has been, sort of a banner year for their cause because, we have to, not only encourage people to vote, but really, again, how can they, live their life in that sort of healthy way? And making a decision to vote in this year is making an affirmative health decision. It's saying, I am going to partake in this, big public event, and I'm going to do it in a way that protects myself and my community. And so I think we are seeing that movement. And I do think that in the future, again, hopefully not, this acute in terms of COVID, but that we will see, things like, okay, how can we, make, hand sanitation stations available? Are there different kinds of locations that work better for different kinds of voters, depending on, people's needs? So, while I don't think any of us, would have wished this on America, you do have to look at some of the innovations and some of the things that we have learned through this process. We'll certainly be debriefing after the election with our coalition, so we can both learn from it and also take it into the future.
Yeah, and certainly this won't be probably the last election cycle without, there's going to be elections next March and April and June, there will still be elections that are happening while COVID is still with us. So all of these things will continue in the short term to be very, very important. Is there anything else that you would like to make sure we talk about today?
Just want to make sure people know that there are safe and healthy voting options, and that, and you can do it. And it's really been amazing and gratifying to see the way that Americans have stepped up. Again, in March, April, May, June, I was a little bit worried about everything. And I'm really, really heartened and excited to see the work that's going on the ground with communities. And, for anything you can do to support your local election officials, if they're asking you to volunteer at the polls, and you're in a, safe and healthy enough position to do so, please consider that. Please consider what your public health officials are asking you to do in your community. I think by following these guidelines, by helping our communities vote, we are really going to, have a successful election. And I'm now very hopeful about that.
I saw on Twitter, I think it was Amanda Littman said, it's interesting. We've had so few social occasions in the past 7 or 8 months. People don't have parties that like standing in line at the polls, as terrible as it is in some ways, is also like a social event. Like, it's like, God, I'm seeing other people.
Exactly. Yes. If you could, see people at a distance and see people come out of their homes. I mean, it was pretty cool at the primary when I was working the line to like run into some of my neighbors. I haven't seen you in so long. And so again, wear your mask and do it at a distance. But it still is, I think even if you're voting from home, you still feel like you are part of this major event that's happening in America right now. And it's true that, we're going to have this year had always been projected to be an incredibly high turnout election. But I really believe we're going to exceed, our vote totals in 2016 for sure. And it's just incredible to think that even if you're doing that from home, you're still a part of that massive movement, and that it's been, weeks in the making, instead of just a day in the making, which is pretty exciting. I call it election season, not just election day, because it feels like it's been going on forever. This is like the longest GOTV period of all time.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's fun to be a part of it. I almost feel like I'm missing out not having to wait in a line. I'm glad I didn't have to wait in a line. I'm glad we make voting easy here, but I was like, everyone else gets to wait in these fun lines. So it really feels like we're all part of something.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, we miss some of the parts of like going to the rallies or, like door to door canvassing and things like that. But, there's new traditions popping up. Taking your kids to the drop box, is a new tradition. So
Yeah.
it's all good.
All right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for the work that you're doing to make sure that everyone knows about the healthy options that they have to vote.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me.
Of course.